Great, well, let's kick it off.
All righty.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Study Secrets, a Guide to Setting Teenagers Up for Success. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. We promise to give you some information that will be very helpful for you and your students. My name is Michelle, and I'm the proud owner of Tutoring Club of McLean, and tonight's webinar is our final in our series of 3 where we share tips for different age groups. And of course, tonight is capping it off with our high school students, grades 9 through 12. And then towards the end of this evening's webinar, you will be able to ask any questions that you have by typing them into the Q&A box, and we'll have some time at the end for our wonderful panelists to answer those questions for you. So thanks again so much for attending, and let's dive on in. So our panelists this evening are 3 wonderful educators with a lot of collective knowledge about teenage development and study skills. We are so thrilled to have them with us today. I'll give you a quick rundown right now, a quick intro, and then they'll have a chance later on in the presentation to discuss their businesses a little bit later. So first up, we have Kathy Essig from Essig Education Group. She is the founder and president of Essig Education Group and spent decades working in special education. Prior to her current practice, she worked in schools as an educator and educational diagnostician, in private practice as an executive functioning coach, as a curriculum consultant to private schools, and as a founding owner of a learning center where she developed the foundational curriculum. Having returned to her private practice, Kathy observes students with variable executive functions, trains them to externalize necessary study strategies, and adapts school curricula to ensure their success. With ever-increasing numbers of bright students experiencing academic struggles, Kathy's practice focuses on the intersection of executive function, resilience, and learning independence. Kathy, welcome tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And next up, we have Paul Rivas with Smith Rivas Study Skills and Academic Coaching. Paul is the author of This Book Will Not Be on the Test and the creator of the online study skills course, Better Grades in Less Time. He has taught study skills to students from 130 high schools and middle schools in the DC region and many more nationwide through his company, Smith Rivas. Paul, welcome this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's fun to be here. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Likewise. And then last but not least, we have our very own Fran F. So Fran started teaching the Orton-Gillingham reading method to dyslexic middle and high school students at the Foreman School in Connecticut. That sparked a lifelong interest in how reading issues, executive function skills, dyslexia, and self-esteem are linked to academic success. Fran taught childhood psychology and adolescent development for over 15 years in Massachusetts before moving to Virginia. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in education. Currently, she is a Tutoring Club of McLean educator and Orton-Gillingham and Wilson Reading System tutor for students with dyslexia. Can't even say it. Her belief is that children will succeed academically when they feel confident with their abilities in the classroom. Fran, welcome tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and Fran's been with us on all 3 webinars, so we're really excited to hear what she has to say again this evening. Such great experience. I don't know about all of you, but I'm so excited to hear what everyone has to share. So tonight I have the pleasure of moderating our presentation with my co-host, Catherine Carroll. Hello, Catherine.
Hi, Michelle.
Catherine recently joined us as our Assistant Enrollment Director. She received her Bachelor of Science and first master's degree from James Madison, where she studied elementary education and family studies. A Northern Virginia native, Catherine taught elementary school in Fairfax County Public Schools for 5 years before leaving the classroom to work in higher education as an admissions recruiter. In addition, Catherine coached Girls on the Run for over 7 seasons and helped found the Marathon Running Club chapter within her school. Prior to joining us, Catherine already had familiarity with tutoring services and creating individualized plans for students from her independent contracting. and her enthusiasm for education does not stop with others. She's also an ardent believer in lifelong learning when it comes to herself and has been pursuing her second master's degree, an online MBA degree from the Jack Welch Management Institute. Again, welcome, Catherine, and thank you for being my co-host. Very excited tonight.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here for our final part of this webinar series. And I have the pleasure of introducing Michelle to everyone. So a little bit about Michelle Scott. She is passionate about helping students and her staff work to their fullest potential and to crush their goals. She is also motivated by a love of teaching and mentoring. And Michelle had opened up our award-winning center over 10.5 years ago now. After a 20+ year leadership career in retail, hospitality, and professional services for industry-leading organizations, Michelle then made the decision to use her vast experience to improve the lives of children through education. As the owner and the director of the Tutoring Club of McLean, she works with hundreds of students every year of all ages and skill levels, and oversees a staff of up to about 20 staff total. Our success at Tutoring Club has been spurred by our hands-on approach, our amazing staff, and the nurturing environment that Michelle has cultivated here. Michelle is also committed to strengthening our communities and giving back, and believes that we can all make a difference in the world in which we live. Improving youth literacy in our area is of particular importance to her, and is what led to hosting yearly book drives for local organizations who run after-school or summer reading programs, and to developing an upcoming scholarship program for children in need who would otherwise not be able to avail themselves to private tutoring. And I know that Michelle is in the process of getting that off the ground and running right now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into tonight's presentation. To start things off, we'll be giving a short presentation based off of the combined information provided by our lovely panelists, as well as our own. Then we will get into an open discussion with each of these panelists and ask them some questions. Next, we'll give a quick overview of each of our services. And then finally, we will finish off the night with a live Q&A in which you can ask any questions that you might have, as Michelle mentioned. Feel free to type those questions into the Q&A box throughout the webinar, and we will certainly get to as many as possible throughout the evening when the time comes. Let's get started.
Great, thank you, Catherine. So first, we'd like to take you into that place that many dare not go, the mind of the teenager. While teens are certainly farther along in brain development than preteens or children, current research shows that the frontal lobe may not finish completely wiring up until around their mid-20s. As we touched on during our last webinar, the frontal lobe is responsible for regulating executive functioning, skills such as regulating our emotions, organizing our thoughts, and planning. Basically, all of those things that help to keep us focused and study well. Since this major part of the brain is still not quite developed for our teens, that means that the more emotional part of their brain is in control. This is especially true during times of stress, which I'm sure we can all remember are very frequent during high school. Teens should be able to think on an abstract level by now. They should be able to think hypothetically, understand figurative language, have advanced reasoning skills, and explore a fuller range of possible solutions. This means they can begin to explore concepts such as love, identity, death, and those other complex issues in life. Adolescents often experience a second round of egocentrism during this time. They are very self-conscious and concerned with the opinions of others, which causes them to become preoccupied with themselves. At the same time, they may feel quite special. You might notice them spending a lot of time alone in their bedrooms or looking at themselves in the mirror. This is completely normal and a natural progression of their development. Since the tendency for this age group is to be self-centered and have a sense of personal specialness, they often think that rules, laws, and consequences apply to others, but not to themselves. This is why teens often engage in those risky behaviors. They may know friends who have gotten hurt or into trouble, but think that they possess some special knowledge that will help them to avoid such consequences. With hormones running rampant and an inability to fully control those emotions, mood swings are another natural phenomenon to expect in teens. It can be difficult to assess when a downtick in mood, though, is a phase or a problem. Depression and anxiety are real concerns in teens, and they do need to be addressed when it's more than just a passing phase. Generally, if a mood lasts about 2 weeks or longer, it needs to be addressed. So this is a very formative time for students. As they are beginning to gain more independence and make more decisions for themselves, they can fall into certain traps when it comes to their studies. For starters, you may notice your student is often tired or has a hard time getting up for school in the morning. This could be because they were up late finishing homework, playing video games or on social media, or out with friends. Not getting enough sleep can exacerbate some of the emotional stress that they are facing and make schoolwork even a greater burden. There are a lot of stresses and activities going on in a teen's life that make it difficult to find time to fit everything in. Most teens will prioritize social activities and end up procrastinating their schoolwork and ultimately cramming in order to get an assignment done or prepare for a test. If it works once, they'll assume this will work every time, and it may reinforce their sense of specialness. Many students struggle with staying organized throughout high school. They may not have been taught or never learned how to properly take notes. They are also prone to even more distractions than younger students, which can come in the form of technology, friends, girlfriends, boyfriends, excessive extracurriculars, and the list goes on. By this stage, teens have typically decentered their support system from adults to peers. Because of this, they may avoid the more difficult task of turning to an adult for help. Teens need to learn to advocate for themselves when they don't understand something. Without doing so, they can easily develop that learned helplessness or a belief that they are unable to control or change their situation, so they do not even try. One of the biggest reasons that high school students don't develop great study skills is that they think they don't need them because they already get good grades. Grades can be arbitrary and inconsistent, and getting straight A's, as we know, doesn't always mean you learned anything. Students often rely solely on memorizing facts rather than trying to understand the actual process. Memorizing facts is, of course, important. However, it's also vital to learn how to develop connections and meanings between those important pieces of information. But we don't want you to fret. There are tactics that you can implement at home to enhance positive study habits that your student can carry with them through high school, college, and life. First, don't jam-pack their schedule. Parents can demonstrate that schoolwork is a top priority by not overscheduling your teens. High school students are already faced with higher levels of pressure than younger kids and are just learning how to manage their own responsibilities as well as social lives. Try and find out what it is your student is really interested in and stick to activities that relate to that. Forcing a sport or a club or volunteer activity on your student that they don't enjoy or feel that they aren't good at can heighten that anxiety, lower the confidence, and drive a wedge. Lifestyle for your student. Exercise is absolutely vital at this stage of development and is proven to reduce stress levels in teens, as is proper nutrition. If you don't do so already, implement family meals most days so that you can have some control over what kinds of foods your student is eating. And don't keep too many sugary drinks and processed snacks in the house. If they see their parents exercising regularly and eating healthy, they are bound to follow suit. Also, ensure that you have a dedicated space so that they can focus. This may seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how many students don't have an area in their home just for schoolwork. Ideally, this space should not be in the center of the house or someplace where they go to relax. If your teen does choose to study in their bedroom, there needs to be a discussion about not working from bed and having electronics removed or switched off during study times. This includes text or chat notifications on their computers as well. Offer them the tools that they need to stay organized and manage their time. While it is tempting to have everything on our phones these days, we recommend a physical daily planner that has space for students to write out their to-dos, due dates, and their notes. Teens need to learn to look at their calendars and allocate appropriate time for studying and homework. You want them to spread out studying for exams over several days, rather than trying to cram everything in during one evening. Additionally, by junior year, parents need to let go of control and allow their students to, for the most part, manage their own schedules. Also allow them to work in effective time blocks. Some teens can work for an hour or two at a time, while others require more frequent breaks to maintain their concentration. You can help your student figure out what their magic number is and encourage them to stick to that time block while studying or completing homework. Additionally, help them to figure out what time of day works best for them to study. I'm sure we can all attest that we have times of days that we are sharper than others. If your student is a morning person, maybe suggest they get up an hour earlier to finish their work. If they are a night owl, help them keep their evenings free so they can do it then. And finally, be sure to encourage open communication and advocacy. Be sure to check in regularly with your student. Let them know that you are there if they need someone to talk to or if they need help solving a specific problem. Teens may have trouble identifying exactly what it is that's bothering. They may say that they study, but it doesn't work, or that the teacher is confusing. Help them stay focused on what the actual issue is rather than the emotion they're feeling, and discuss ways to solve that problem. Do they need to talk with a teacher to clarify issues, maybe a tutor to master those skills, or to come up with a more productive study plan? Self-advocacy is a lifelong skill, and having a positive group of peers and adults to turn to for advice and guidance is key in developing this. So now that we've told you a little bit, we're going to open up the discussion to our wonderful panelists to address some of the questions that we get. Catherine?
Thanks so much, Michelle. So the first question that we are going to kick things off with this evening is, what are some typical signs of high stress or anxiety in teens? And how can parents address these without alienating their student? For this one, we're going to start with Kathy.
Oh,
Kathy,
Kathy,
looks
you're
like you're
muted.
still on mute.
I knew that was going to happen after I was the one that just smacked my glass over.
Oh no.
That's okay, it was empty. So basically, when we think of signs of stress and anxiety in teens, you may see more of it right now during the pandemic, but generally there are 4 areas that we look at. And those are irritability, isolation, avoidance, and a drop in grades. So if we think of them, they're all kind of commingling. And your child might be snappier than usual. They might be pulling back some in how they engage with you or with friends. They might be avoiding work. You might notice that they aren't doing homework as they had previously, or you might be getting notes from teachers that assignments are coming in late or missing. And then ultimately you may see a drop in grades. With all of this, you have to look at the severity of what's happening with how you address it. The first thing you have to do is, I always tell parents they have to enter these meetings as if they're walking into a boardroom. Your emotion will absolutely exacerbate their emotion. So you have to approach everything just with a flat affect and gathering information. Then you have to determine if this is something you can help or if you need outside resources, because ultimately your goal, first and foremost, is to parent. And you want a loving relationship when it's all over. And with teens, that can shift fairly quickly if they really don't want to open up to you. So address it without emotion. And then if they're still seeming like they can't open up to you, get help from someone else.
Great advice, Kathy. Paul, what would you like to add to that one?
So I'd say that you want to ask the kid, like, what do you wish you had more time for? You know, that's my favorite way to start these conversations. Like, oh, you seem like you've been really busy lately. What do you wish you had more time for? If you could get better grades in less time, what would you do with your free time? If you could wave a wand and magically get whatever grades you want, how would you spend that free time? That's the stuff that you want to think about in order to motivate yourself to go deal with all the stuff that you'd rather not deal with.
Absolutely. And Fran, we turn to you for some final thoughts on this question.
I definitely agree with Kathy and Paul. And I also want to add that stress and anxiety are real for teenagers. And we may think as adults that we're the ones under stress because we have a job and we have bills to pay and other obligations, but teens are definitely under stress, especially when you throw, as Kathy said earlier, this COVID era on it. There is a lot of anxiety and uncertainty right now. And some of the things that bear repeating are anxiety shows up in different ways, and sometimes it's just a little bit of anxiety where they go to school or they take a test and they just blank out during a test, but then they remember it later, so it may look like they're not really trying because, oh, they forgot. Or they seem stuck and they're unable just to move forward, so they're kind of always going around in circles on the same issue. They tend to focus on the negative on just about everything. And they have a really hard time seeing anything positive. They may feel that they just kind of stop and they just shut down too. Or you might see the opposite, really excessive outbursts. And they're frequent too, more so than your usual outbursts or mood swings. So some ways to kind of help decrease anxiety that also bear repeating are physical activity in teens is absolutely crucial. That exercise helps reduce neurotransmitters that decrease anxiety, and it helps increase neurotransmitters that calm anxiety. Sleep is absolutely crucial, and it's a lifelong skill also because you're trying to prep them for college to get enough sleep. Diet has been mentioned, and some other ways to kind of bond together or try to cook a meal together. It's a great way, it's a great life skill to talk about. And sometimes when you don't look at your teen directly, it's a little easier. So if you're on a car ride and you're both facing forward, you don't have to have that stress of looking at each other, and you can kind of look down or look in different ways. I find that car rides are very helpful in tough situations. And then you can pull over if it gets too tough.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to move on to the second question. And the second question this evening is, how can parents tell if their student is really learning the material or if they might just be coasting along? For this one, we're going to start with Paul.
So this is one of my favorite topics because grades have nothing whatsoever to do with learning. And anyone who ever took high school French knows that it's possible to get an A in a class and not master the material. So I'm super focused on helping people actually learn the stuff. And the way school works these days, if you actually learn the stuff, you will always get the grades you want, right? There's no way to mess that up. The way they give grades out, it's set up. They wish everyone had straight A's. Every teacher wishes every kid could have straight A's. Right? And it pains the teacher for the kid to not get the straight A's. So the teachers are trying to give A's. It's in the school's best interest for people to get A's. And yet somehow people don't, and that's because they're not actually learning the stuff. So the way you tell this is you ask the student to make their own study guide with everything they think is going to be on the test and use it to quiz themselves. And if they haven't done that ever, then they definitely haven't been mastering this stuff. And if they are doing it, but then they're not quizzing themselves, then they already did the hard part and they're missing out on the big benefit, right? The only way to actually learn anything is to quiz yourself on it often enough that you don't forget, but not so often that it's too easy. So That's what we're going for. Make your own study guides and quiz yourself. If you're not doing that, you have not learned it as well as you think you have, no matter what.
That's an excellent point, Paul. Fran, what would you like to add?
I think teens are pretty good at coasting, because if they could kind of get just enough done to keep adults kind of out of their business, then it's like, oh, okay. So it's often why I get called in as a tutor or an executive function coach, that, oh, I have a very smart teen who's either not doing it very well at school, or could do a whole lot better. So in addition to the study skills that Paul was talking about, I also look at their critical thinking skills, like how can they apply what's in the subject to what's going on in current life. And there's lots of things that's going on in current life that can easily be applied to just about any topic. And I also think writing is a big issue, and for almost every student. So one of the ways, especially if they're not interested in the topic in the first place, so maybe turn it into a project first, and then it's a little bit easier to write about and talk about.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fran. And so, Kathy, what would you like to add to this one?
I'm going to twist it a little bit from actual skill sets and talk about parents can tell usually first by just trusting what the teacher is saying. They're the ones really in the trench day to day, looking at how the child is interacting with the material in class and how they are being assessed and how prepared they seem to be for what they're doing. If the teacher is saying that there might be an issue, listen to the fact that there might be an issue. But I'm going to say conversely, if the teacher feels that the child is doing really well, listen to that too. Sometimes we worry that they aren't really seeing the child. You know, we're not thinking they're giving their best, so then we worry that maybe the teacher isn't seeing everything and isn't really noticing that our child might be skating a bit. But I think teachers generally know what's going on. I think also, particularly during the pandemic, we can use dinner time if we are actually eating as a family to find out what's going on. Because if it's just part of a conversation, it's not high stakes. We're not drilling them on what did you learn, let me quiz you, but just what was interesting today. And if you can have a discussion about something, you know, I always tell people if they can teach it, they know it. If you can have a discussion about something, you're probably learning. Also, Fran had mentioned front seat, back seat. The best place to get your information from children is in the car. And particularly if they're in carpool, get it from their friends and then go back and talk to them, because they're going to give up all sorts of information from the back seat. So then the final thing I would say, if you see your child consistently working and the process has always worked and isn't changing, they're probably not coasting. If you see your child doing a lot of cramming, they're probably not learning, because cramming doesn't develop working memory.
Thank you for that, Kathy. I would completely agree. The third question, and we're going to start with Fran for this one, is how does an online-based curriculum affect high school students in enhancing positive study habits?
Thank you. Many parents are really worrying right now about the quality of education. They're worrying, is their teen falling behind? And one of the reasons they're worrying is because the teen is home and they're kind of overhearing what's going on in school classrooms now. And they're kind of seeing it maybe for the first time in years, what's really happening. So I taught college for over 20 years in Massachusetts. And one of the things you want to work on right now with your teenager is how to prep them for college. Because once they get to college, they're out of your sight for the most part. So what can you do? And one of the 3 key skills that I found that helped every college student was developing resilience, developing grit, and developing independence. And one of the biggest ways is just learning to pace yourself and time management. And again, that is a lifelong skill, and we've talked about lifelong skills, but this is when you really need to set those lifelong skills in motion. So, you know, how long can they concentrate? How do they renew their concentration? One of the ways that you help with concentration, besides learning your study skills and all that, is you got to get around, you got to get out and get moving. You have to be able to decrease your anxiety and avoid burnout. And if you're cramming, like has been mentioned, it's not helping the teen brain at all to cram. Learn to take good class notes. Paul's talked about this, that you have to learn to take class notes, and you have to learn to develop your own study guide. Those solid notes help improve your long-term memory and, more important, your recall when you need them on a test or a quiz. Same thing with homework. We talked about no cramming, spread it out over a period of days. We talked about the study spots. And when you're in college, the same thing. You need to learn where are your study spots. And I think it's also important to learn to talk to a teacher in high school and learn to ask for advice and clarification on problems. And I think you also have to unplug from technology on a daily basis, whether it's in your car or car ride, whatever. And then if you're really still struggling with the teen and online learning, I mean, this is a perfect time to hire a study skills coach, an executive function coach, and an academic tutor. And if you don't want to call it a tutor, call it an academic coach, just like you would hire an academic or a sports coach to teach them sports.
Absolutely. Kathy, what would you like to add to this one?
Well, I think Fran hit a variety and a lot. And I think the one thing that you can say about online learning, and something that I've been writing about, and we've seen a lot in some of the research and some of the news that has come out on it, is that distance learning and online-based curriculums actually enhance study habits because it gives us the bird's eye view of where their vulnerability and where their success is. By being at home, they don't have any of the classical conditioning of being able to shift, of somebody actually saying to them, here's how you will initiate your work, of anybody giving them the planning and the organization tools by putting it on the board and spelling out what's going to happen. Instead, they get a plethora of emails in the morning, and they have to sort through it and organize and manage their day. It's the first time that we're having students prior to college doing that kind of work for a long period of time. And we know that actually students are doing a bit better with it than we anticipated. What I like most about how we're enhancing positive study habits is we're seeing earlier where we can shore up some of the vulnerability. And we're going to be able to send this group of students to college more prepared because they worked on all of those independent skills in high school.
Thanks so much, Kathy. And I would agree with that as well. And Paul, what would you like to add?
So I'd say that the biggest advantage to moving school online is that it's made it painfully clear that the social value of school was drastically underrated and the educational value of school was drastically overrated. It's obviously entirely possible to learn everything you learn in school in a fraction of the time. The cost is that you don't get to see your friends or get that group socialization with even people who maybe aren't your friends, right? So the biggest advantage to that, all the time that's, you know, why are we only doing school 4 days a week now, right? There is no reason on earth that school should be happening less than ever, unless we're admitting that there was tons of time wasted before. So the biggest advantage is that now there's more time during the smart working hours available to the kid's brain to get the work done. So since the school day is shorter, and since there are good early in the day hours available, another day a week, perhaps some cases, every student has the hours available to them to do the schoolwork are much more propitious to doing a good job, right? It's like they have a way better chance of doing a good job now because they have daytime hours when they're not exhausted, when they haven't been at sports practice for 3 hours, after dinner. Nothing's going to work after dinner. Now they can get this stuff done during the week, during sensible times, right? The biggest disadvantage is that unless the student is really going after the teacher, as some other panelists have suggested, it can be hard to figure out what you got wrong, right? So you hand in the stuff, it gets graded. Unless you dig, it's not always obvious why you missed what you missed. And in any subject that involves math, if you don't fix what you missed this week, then next week is going to go worse. So you have to be super on top of it, and that takes lots of good communication with the teachers to request that they make it easy to see why you missed what you missed.
Interesting points, Paul. Thank you so much. I think the biggest takeaway there is that, you know, this generation of students will definitely be ready for the workforce when they come out of all of this with all these new skills that they're learning. So then to go to our final question for right now, our question is, in terms of pitfalls for this age group, as well as solutions to combat those pitfalls, do you have anything to add here? And Kathy, we're going to go back and start with you.
Okay, thank you. I would say the biggest pitfall for this age group is sleep, because it's the most obvious with the toll it takes on the child. Sleep has become an issue that's being studied a lot, too much, for this age group. And in fact, they're studying sleep disorders now with this age group. And this is the first time ever that they're looking at sleep disorders with teens and young adults. And the realizing that obvious reason why they're needing to look at this is usually centered around technology. So it goes in two directions. First, there's just the social interaction that occurs through technology and causes students to spend too much time on technology. But then that coupled with they have to be on technology for school, they aren't really good at managing themselves. So instead of managing how they're using their time and how appropriately they're using the time. So instead of sticking to schoolwork, they might be screen shifting, or they might be spending too much time on breaks by saying, I'll just go play 10 minutes of game. Nobody plays 10 minutes of a game. The other piece that has become even more disturbing is a study that came out of the West Coast in the spring of 2019 that talked about sleep disorders because people are working in their beds and with their computers in their beds, and then also at night sitting on their phones and their computers, and their brains are starting to determine that the bed is actually a workplace rather than a sleep place. And so students are not going into REM, which is essential for all of their intellectual growth and their physical growth. So that is most disturbing, is recognizing now through fMRIs that REM is not being adequately, deeply moved into. And that's all because the brain is deciding that it has to hold the person awake, because computers and bed equal I need to be working, as opposed to I say I'm slowing down or I'm using this to become sleepy. It's got a counter effect. So anything you can do, I would say the first thing is get your kids off their beds if they're using computers or phone or anything that is a piece of technology.
Thank you so much for that, Kathy. I think I would be the first to admit that I am very guilty of that even as an adult, and I think many of us are. So, Paul, what would you like to add here?
So to me, the biggest concern with high school is that the kids have very little time that's at their own disposal. So every minute of the day is spoken for, and every minute of the day someone's telling them what to do. So they don't have super strong time management skills. Whereas in college, there's almost nothing to do, right? For the average kid who's trying to go to college in high school, that person is going to find that they have like 40% less work to do in college. And so too much free time in college is your worst enemy. So when you have too much free time and too little time management skill, then that's why so many people end up on academic probation after the first semester, right? It's like super predictable. You've never had to manage your time before. Now you have more time to manage than you're ever going to have again the rest of your life, and you're not ready for it, right? So teach kids to manage their time.
Great. I would agree with that, Paul. And Fran, final thoughts here?
Sure. Definitely there, as I was working on this, I was working on it as both a parent, a teacher, a tutor, and a former teenager to see what was going on in the teenager mind and what were some of the pitfalls. And there's a lot going on in a teen's life, and I think everybody has to maybe sometimes take a step back and look at that. There are a lot of highs and there are a lot of lows with friends, social media, the pressure to excel, girlfriends, boyfriends. And for some teens, there are even more complex issues, learning challenges, physical issues, mental illness, all real problems that are, happening in a teen's life, or they know somebody. So there is a lot of drama. And I think what I'll add, I think the sleep, the technology, the time management, absolutely crucial. Exercise, I've talked about before, absolutely crucial. But I also think one of the best things I did as a parent to help my teen avoid some of the pitfalls that occur too often in adolescence are, I just had to be really honest and brutal about some conversations, and they were not fun conversations. They were tough. And I think everybody who's had a teenager has had those types of conversations, and you really just have to sometimes make those conversations. And even going to Starbucks and having a cup of coffee, sometimes that's where you have those conversations. You don't know exactly when they're going to come up or what they're going to be about. But I also think that we have to realize as parents and educators, and especially parents, that the goal is to help them develop and be independent young adults, and that they're going to pursue their life goals, and they're not there to pursue your life goals. And I think that would be my final comment on all of that.
Very true. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle now.
You'd think after all these Zooms, I'd remember to unmute myself. So I think that was really, really resonated with me, Fran, when you were talking about making sure that you're helping them to follow kind of like their life journey, right? Not trying to force the parents' life journey on them, and really, like Paul said, I mean, managing time is just such a basic skill we know how to as adults, but students really struggle when they've had their time managed for them their whole life, right? And now trying to figure it out on their own. And Kathy, I'm going to be the second to admit that I guess I shouldn't be on my iPad at nighttime, right? I'm not getting that REM sleep, that I need. So I'm sure that's, if we can do that as parents, our, children can, kind of follow suit as well. So thanks for all that great information, everyone. So now that we've given everyone a little bit more information on the developmental stage of this age group, some of those pitfalls and solutions to studying, the importance of continuing to enhance positive study habits for our high school students, we want to spend just a couple minutes here to give you a little bit more information on each of our organizations and how we might be able to support your students in achieving their academic goals. So as I mentioned earlier, our company is Tutoring Club of McLean, and we are an education center really for all ages and abilities. And we provide that individualized academic assistance and coaching and create a customized game plan for each student based on their particular needs. We are located on the border of McLean and North Arlington and are providing both online and in-person tutoring and academic coaching for students. And our mission is really to provide students, from those early learning itty-bitty readers all the way up through our college preparation students, just to give them the resources and opportunity to become those confident and self-motivated learners for life. Our team is made up of highly trained, caring, and passionate educational professionals like Fran and Catherine, who you've heard from this evening, really dedicated to every student's success. And our families have really quickly grown to appreciate us for our warm, engaging, fun, nurturing environment, our flexibility, and ultimately, really the results that we provide. And so for this evening, we'd like to offer a special for joining us this evening. So for the next 2 weeks until October 15th, we're offering 2 free trial hours and a free consultation to develop an educational plan for your students for only $50. And then we also have a new live online study skills course. It's an 8-week course, and that's normally $7.99, and we're offering that for just $3.99. And we'll be providing details in a follow-up email on how you can take advantage of that. And then Fran, anything else that you would add as, kind of from a tutor perspective with Tutoring Club?
Oh, thank you. So I really try to work on, it's a 2-pronged approach. I work on improving their self-confidence for the long run so that they're going to be able to accomplish these tasks as an independent learner once they're out of the tutoring phase. And I also work on students to try to not hurry up and get to the answer as quickly as possible. Even if they're wrong, they're just trying to get through the exercise as quick as possible. And then let's take some time and work on the exercise and talk about it and what does it really mean, and work on vocabulary. I also work on the test taking skills. And, the goal is to make sure they can master increasingly complicated problems as they move into further advanced courses in high school and on into college.
Great, thank you. And so Kathy would love to hear more about ESSEG Education Group.
Okay, Michelle, thank you. We are an executive function group that works with high school and college age students, and we are those of us who are the executive function coaches are all master's level teachers, special educators with a background in ADHD and executive function. Most obviously you'll find when you come to work with us, the 3 of us also have extensive background in curriculum development. So we work with very unique programming. Along with the 3 of us who are the executive function coaches, there are 2 writing coaches who are professional writers that I have working with students on the college application process, basically the essays. I felt that it was important to add them in because that's a very vulnerable time for students with executive function. And along with it being a time that's very vulnerable for executive function, most students do not know how to write a personal narrative. So I trained 2 writers to be able to see the executive function, but teach the personal narrative. So all of our courses are online. You can see it at the bottom of the slide, essegeducationgroup.com. But a couple of things that I'm excited to highlight, and I thank Michelle for letting me highlight. Our individual coaching is, again, 9th grade through college, but we have a special coaching program for college students who are possibly coming back from a leave of absence or from being on academic probation that's intensive, where we do daily coaching daily accountability checks. And that's been a very, very successful program for students who are re-entering college after having had to come home. We also have started a collaboration with Pascalvac and Associates that we're doing an online program called Successing that takes it from the neuropsych all the way through executive function training in a package deal and all online. We have a course called Essential Study Skills, which is the core of my curriculum and my teaching and training that I wrote years ago when I was at the Potomac School, and have updated every year based on current research. Our courses are online. At this point, everything's online. But we do have an online element that you will find on the website. We also have these courses that we're currently teaching online, used to be in person. And then our coaching, again, is now all online, but we're located in North Arlington when this all ends.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Such a wonderful company. Paul, would love to hear about your company as well.
Thanks. So the best place to see everything that we do is on our main website that's listed at the front of the presentation. So that one's got lots more information than this one has. So on smithrevis.com, you'll find 100 blog posts featuring local colleagues such as Kathy, and study skills tips and book recommendations. You'll find a link to our YouTube channel that has 150 videos ranging from snippets to 90-minute shows in English and Spanish. There's 3 hours of original study skills content in Spanish on our YouTube channel. You can get the book. This book will not be on the test, right? It's got a chapter on every kind of kid, and then it has 5 chapters on how to get straight A's if you're into that. The contents of the book is what we teach in our individual one-on-one study skills courses. So that's 6 hours, usually 1 hour a week for 6 weeks. We cover the crucial study skills 1 hour at a time. And then everything that I wish we could get done with people in 6 hours, we have added to the 6-hour content and put in this online course that you see here. So Better Grades in Less Time is a self-contained online course that students do at their own pace. There are 40 short videos and a 36-page study skills handbook. And they watch the videos and do the exercises and then write their own custom study skills system from a template we've provided. So that's for people who will sit down and do it, who can't be bothered to read the book. Some people won't do either of these things and they need one-on-one attention, so that's fun too. And then there's people who'll just read the book and do what it says. And then there's people who are really good at YouTube and reading blogs, and they can find all that stuff there. So there's lots of places to get help in 2 languages. Go do it.
Great. And do we get the book from your website? Is that where they get the book?
The book is available on Amazon. It's published by Roman and Littlefield. It's called This Book Will Not Be on the Test.
Great, great. Thanks, Paul. Cool stuff. So thank you all so much for telling us a little bit more about your companies, Kathy and Paul. So now we're going to open up our live Q&A to our audience, and we'd love to know what's on everyone else's mind. So go ahead and enter your questions in the Q&A. And I know we have one that somebody emailed us over in advance that we can kind of kick off while we wait for additional questions. So the first one is, what kind of planning tools work best for teenagers, and how to get my kid invested in those tools so they actually use them? Anyone want to answer that? Kathy, is that something you can speak on?
Sure, I can start. The planning tools that I believe are best are physical planning tools, having a planner. and a physical planner. Many students want to work with online planners. There are two issues to that. First, they generally tend to not keep it up because it's just one more tab in their multiple tabs that are open and that they're screen shifting between. But secondly, an online planner doesn't allow you to look backwards and forwards. So you can't see where you made your mistakes in the past by not planning completely. You also can't see where you're going in the future if you have a long-term project. Seniors often have projects like a capstone project that might go over several months. And to be able to, on a physical planner or a month at a glance calendar, see how they're going to break that down into nightly work so that they're not, taking 2.5 months off and freaking out for 2 weeks is really the best way to plan. And the only way to do that is to have something that you can physically keep shifting. And I think the easiest way of doing that is with a physical planner.
Yeah, I agree. We are at the top of the hour. Fran or Paul, would you have anything to add in addition to the physical planner? I know that's something we really reinforce with our students.
I'll add, just get a planner that's they like. Let them go shopping for the planner. There's all kinds of them out there, but if you get one that they like, it tends to work better. They're more invested. Stickers.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stickers and planners now.
Colors, covers.
Yes, colors, covers.
Yes. Great. Paul, anything or?
Yeah, so I would add that the planner needs to have the weekend at the end of the week. Any calendar that starts with Sunday is the devil, throw it away. Any planner that starts with Sunday is worse than useless, throw it away. You need a weekly schedule with Saturday and Sunday at the end, and you need a quarter calendar or a semester calendar with the weekend at the end, because that's when the weekend happens in the mind of the student. You can print these things free anytime from the motivation page of my website, which I have put in the chat. So there's no excuse. It is totally true. I super duper agree with Kathy that it's better on paper. Yeah. And I totally agree with Fran that whatever one the student is willing to use is the one you should use. Talk them into using one that's going to make their life easier.
Yep. Love it.
Yep.
Very
and
true.
I have a quick thought to add to that too. I was going to say, in addition to an actual planner, for students that are much more visual learners, I know that, you can get the whiteboard calendars that you can just stick up on a wall and then write everything on there. And that works wonders. My brother used to do that when he was in high school because he constantly lost his physical planner. So, yep.
Yeah. Yeah, whiteboards work well too. I love that Kanban model, right? With moving the little stickers on it as well. So we ran a little bit over. Thank you everyone for hanging on with us. And thank you to all our wonderful panelists and my co-hosts for your insightful information this evening. I hope everybody's able to walk away with at least one or two, things that you can use for your kiddos going forward. Please spread the word if you have friends or family with students who can benefit from more content such as this webinar series, because we will be developing more in the coming months. And we'll be sharing a recording of this webinar shortly, along with the details of how to redeem the discount that we talked about and our free PDF with some study tips for grades 9 through 12. So thank you again, everyone, so much, and have a wonderful evening and stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.